What's going on, guys? All right, so this evening, I'm just going to go over and do a recap of the tournaments and the baits I used in the first two points tournaments of the year. Um, so, just to recap both of those a little bit before we dive into the baits. So, the first tournament was on No Lin, and it didn't start off well at all. So the week prior, I had done a little practicing, and then that weekend before, I fished a little open tournament and done really well. Basically, just stuck to one pattern all day long. The fish were in the very backs of the creeks, in the dirty water. I was throwing a spinnerbait, pretty much done that all day long. Had a little over 15 pounds with a 5-pounder. So was like, all right, well, the next weekend the weather was going to be a little bit better, a little bit warmer. So I was like, well, we'll just try this first. Swing through some of these areas and try this and, kind of see what happens. So I slid back into some of these areas and, it wasn't happening at all. We ended up catching a few fish back in those areas, all small fish, no keepers at all, and struggled for the first hour and a half or so, and really, spiraled for a while, and decided this ain't working. We're gonna have to change something. Started going out further, still catching fish, and I was moving further out, and it still wasn't happening. Really kind of started catching less fish than I was in the back. So I got to thinking, it's like, what, I got to do something. So I actually took a little time and moved further out, back out towards the mouths and the tips, towards the main body, and started getting some bites, and ended up catching, only ended up catching 3 keepers for that day. Just really struggled that day and spent more time on past history than I should have. So one thing I'm trying to work on is not getting caught up on prior stuff, especially in the spring. When their fish are constantly changing. Now in the summertime, it's a little different when, they are either go all the way up shallow or move out deep. Week to week, you can pretty much do the same thing and figure something out, shallow or deep. But, when the springtime, when these fish are moving so much, and little wind changes, weather changes, water level change, when it messes with these fish, when it positions them different, that's when you've just got to be able to transition and be able to go from one thing to the next, and just be able to roll right into something else. But anyway, so we'll start. I'll go over the baits for that tournament, and then I will go over the baits for the second one. So the first tournament, started out in the backs, again, throwing the spinnerbait most of the time, and just could not get anything. I thought that was going to be the deal again that week, and it was not. Throwing these on a 7.3, it's a 1/2 ounce spinnerbait. 7.3 medium heavy, a little bit faster reel. I think this is a 7.1 reel. I've just got so used to throwing a spinnerbait on a 7-1. I know I can reel it slower, I can reel it faster. I just have got used to using this particular reel for so long. I kind of know what to do and roll into to that, and how I can slow roll or, you know, suspend these spinner baits and reel them over cover and just do different things. And this is on, so that's another thing. Line, when I'm throwing a spinner bait, changes between where I'm going or where I'm going to be throwing these spinner baits. So for the first tournament, it was 17-pound fluorocarbon. And then I changed to 15-pound fluorocarbon for the second one because it's just a little bit different situation. So the second thing we were throwing in that tournament was a shallow diving DT crankbait. This is a DT8, through a DT6 too, but just DT8s and 6s are one of my go-tos this time of year. And this is a 7-foot medium Cashin rod and just a loose, this is actually a 7.5 reel. Because sometimes you can run these crankbaits a little faster in the springtime sometimes and get bites on them, and you can also slow them down and just bump them along, you know, just depending on what the fish are biting. That's kind of why I like a faster reel, because to me, I can do both better with a faster reel, and it's easier on me than trying to do both with a slower reel, because a slower reel, you can reel it slow, but to reel it fast, you've got to wind it faster. With a fast reel, you can either just reel it real slow, or you can just reel it normal, and it'll do both things. So that's just easier to me. But that's one thing. Another thing we were throwing and catching fish on. So probably the two things that we caught them, well, three things we caught the majority of the fish on at the end of the day was a Texas rig, just a plain old, you know, plain old Texas rig, 17-pound fluorocarbon, 7.4 heavy, and this reel's an 8.2, but you know, you'll see when I start talking about reels that I tend to use a lot of faster reels. I do have some slower reels, but I use a lot of faster reels. About the only time I will use a slower reel some in the wintertime, and then when it comes to summertime and I have different cranking setups, and we'll see that later on down the road in other videos, but I have, most of the time I throw 3 cranking setups in the summertime. I have 2 faster ones and then a slower one. So a Texas rig, and this is what our big fish come off of. We had in the first tournament, we had almost a 5-pounder on, or no, it was almost 6 pounds actually on a Texas rig. So one other thing we were catching fish on was a Carolina rig. So there's a million different ways to throw, well, there's several different ways people throw a Carolina rig. People throw it with swivels, people throw it with bobber stops, you know, you can throw it with beads, you can throw it with brass pieces. This one is just a lead weight, a glass bead, a piece of brass, and a Spro swivel. And this is just a wide gap EWG hook with the creature bait on it. But some people throw, you know, I've heard of people putting a fluorocarbon leader. I mean, I'll throw a fluorocarbon leader, but there's people that throw mono leaders to get the bait to float up. I particularly don't like to do that. I just basically just stretch out about, you know, ever how long I want my leader to be off of my line that's already on the rod, cut it, put my weight and bead and swivel on there, take that piece, tie the hook on, and then tie it back onto the swivel. And that's what I use. I have before, if I'm throwing in something that's, I'm gonna get hung a lot, or if I could get the hook hung a lot, I will throw, sometimes I'll throw a 20-pound main line and a 17-pound leader, just so if I do get the hook hung and I break off, I've got a better chance of just losing the hook and the bait instead of losing my swivel, my weight, and all that stuff, and I can just tie a new leader on. But Carolina rig is another thing we were catching fish on. And you can put any kind of bait on these Texas rigs, Carolina rig that you want. Some people put a worm on a Carolina rig. Some people put a fluke. I just put creature baits on them. You can put a Senko on a Texas rig. You can put a crawl on it. You can put a creature bait or whatever. And the last thing that we did end up catching some fish on in the first tournament was a minnow. I got out and caught some, scoped around a little bit, caught some on a minnow. This is just a 4 1/4 inch freeloader. I think this is either electric shad or gizzard shad. And that's just a 3/16 ounce VMC minnow shaker jig head. I think this is the 3/0 hook, I think, or maybe it's a 2. I don't remember which one that is. And I'm just throwing. So this is the Sunline sinking braid, and I've got a 12-pound Tatsu leader on here, a Seaguar Tatsu leader. But that sinking braid is really nice in the, like especially shaking a jig head minnow or anything on a spinning rod where you're throwing braid, because the sinking braid, if you're up here on the boat and you got the bottom here, you're tied straight to the bait because the braid sinks with it, with the fluorocarbon and everything else. You use regular braid is like mono, it floats. So when you've got regular braid and then a fluorocarbon leader, your fluorocarbon is going to sink, so you won't see it, but under the water, when your line goes down, there'll be a bow in the line. So where your fluorocarbon is pulling it down, there's still a bow in that line where that braid's trying to float, but then your weight, whatever you've got on your leader is pulling that braid down. So you've got an arch in your line, all the time, unless you're throwing something like this. This is All Might braid by Sunline. And this stuff's not cheap at all. But I like throwing it on spinning rods because you're directly tied to that bait and to that leader. There's no extra, bow in your line. And I've fished with regular braid for years and never had a problem. It's not really that big a problem when you're close to your bait, when you might be just pitching a wacky worm around docks or laydowns, or you're skipping docks when you're not real far. But when you're further away from that bait, when you're throwing this thing 80 to 100 feet out in front of the boat, and you're letting it sink down 20 feet, you've got some loss of some contact with that bait when using regular braid. Like I said, that's just this All Might is in weird weights. But you have to go off the diameter of the line. Now the weight rating is correct, but if you look at 11-pound All Might braid, it's going to be and if you got regular 10-pound braid and this 11-pound All Might braid, it's just going to be thinner than 10-pound regular braid. That's why it's so expensive, because it's so small. So I get 16-pound in this. So this is 16-pound All Might because it's the same diameter as 10-pound braid, but it's got 6 more pound of breaking strength or whatever. And then I've got my 12-pound Tatsu leader. But this is a 7.2 medium, Shimano X Pride solid tip rod. So the last 4 to 6 inches of the tip is solid. It's not a hollow graphite blank like the rest of the rod. The tip is solid, so you got more there to feel the bite, or to feel the bottom, or whatever you're feeling for. And it shakes that. You just got more tip in it, and it shakes minnows and everything just unbelievably well. All right, so that's the first tournament. We ended up 16th out of, with 3 fish. We ended up, I don't remember the weight. We ended up 16th out of, I think it was 40 some boats or whatever ended up in the first one. So the second one, the second tournament was on Rough River. And that lake speaks for its name. Not rough as in rough water, but the fishing is a lot more tougher than it is on Nolin. Now it really wasn't that day. I say that, and we caught 30, 40 fish that day, but they were all small fish. So going into this tournament, I didn't have any time to practice at all. So I take that back. I did the weekend before on Sunday. I went and was throwing around a little bit, and kind of the same areas where we did catch some fish, but I couldn't practice right up to the tournament. So I was a little skeptical about doing the same thing because they had bit me before. But I started on a place that could have been, could go kind of either way. It's kind of a little transition area. And I started catching fish. So started catching fish first thing in the morning, and, catching fish. Well, about an hour and a half or so into the tournament, I've got a Minn Kota Ultrex on my boat, and the trolling motor quits working. And I'm like, this is not good. So, I'm messing with it, I'm resetting it, I'm unhooking batteries, I'm checking batteries, and nothing's, the trolling motor itself is turning and, pulling the boat, but it's not steering. And anybody that knows anything about an Ultrex, they have cables, but they're electronically assisted, or cable, I don't know which way they say it's assisted, but it's an electronically assisted motor. So it has cables and it has an electric steering motor. So if that steering motor, if it's not steered, it is extremely hard to steer that motor with the foot pedal. So honestly, worst case scenario is to steer it with like that, but you're better off not doing it and not breaking something, the foot pedal or the cables or something else. So I'm calling people. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I'm talking to people from Minn Kota, and they had their own deal going on with the service tech passing away from Minn Kota at that same weekend at the tournament at I believe it was Tom Bigby, maybe wherever the elites were. That's where that happened. So anyway, I'm talking to people on the phone, can't figure anything else out. Well, come to find out, something's wrong with the motor. We're not fixing it on the water. So I make another phone call to David Mercer, a guy that does all my boat work for me, and he says, I have an extra trolling motor you can use, but it's not Ultrex, it's not Spotlock or anything like that. So I call the tournament director. Can I swap this trolling motor? Is it legal in this tournament to swap this trolling motor? Yes, you can do that as long as the boat does not leave the lake. So I get the trolling motor brought down to the lake. And luckily I have tools in my truck for situations. I get the trolling motor swapped, and it takes me at least an hour. I didn't look at my phone or nothing during this time. And I get the trolling motor swapped. I get back to fishing, and I'm still right back into it. I'm catching fish. They're all just short fish. I'm not catching any keepers at all. And I heard Jason Christie say this a long time ago, and I've heard a lot of other older fishermen say this, older than him, that have been around a long time, pros and everything. I never leave fish to find fish, which is a hard thing to do when you're catching small fish, but your mindset is, if I catch enough of these, I'll catch a decent fish later on. And that's kind of happened. I had a 3.5 pounder and 3 more keepers. Just could not find that 5th fish. Ended up 12th in that tournament. 12th or 13th in that tournament, and that brought me down to 13th, 12th. I was 13th because that brought me down to 12th in the points overall after the first 2 tournaments. So I have another one this weekend on Rough River coming up. So we'll see. But the bait that was used in that tournament was this right here. Just a plain old jackhammer. I mean, that's literally the only thing. I caught fish on a couple other baits, but they were all like little bitty, and I wouldn't even talk about them if I had thrown this all day long. But and then the only thing it's got on the back of it is a 4.5-inch spunk shad. This is, I can't remember the color, but it's like a shad color. It's green and white with like a silver and green spunk shad trailer. It's just a 7.2 medium heavy with a 7.2 reel, throwing it on 15-pound fluorocarbon. I mean, that's literally all the fish will weighed in come off this right here. So that's what I threw all day long. Probably going to start out throwing this again because I'm probably not gonna have any time to practice before this one again. But gonna probably start out doing this and then transition to some other things, just depending on kind of what we find going on. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for some other videos, and I'm going to do my top baits of April and everything. So y'all be on the lookout for those videos, and we'll see if we can't catch some more fish. See y'all.